Greetings and welcome to part 2 of the Genre Grinder Shot on Video Horror Addendum. This is essentially part 6 of what I'm thinking is going to become an annual series on the subject, so make sure to check out parts 1 through 4 of the original Shot on Video Horror podcast, as well as part 1 of this addendum, unless you don't feel like it. Either way, sit back, relax, be kind, and rewind. So then the next one is Paura el Diavolo.
I love it when you pronounce Italian titles.
The Fear of the Devil. Utterly homemade. And despite the title, this is not an Italian movie. It is an English director, Darren Ward, who is a fan of Italian genre movies. And he has a little production company called Giallo Films. And I think he just chose the Italian title for the fun of it. But the funny thing is the British accents are thick enough that I struggled to understand what they were saying anyway.
It might as well have been unsubtitled Italian.
Yeah. He's still making movies. He made a crime thriller called The Day of Vengeance in 2010 and an action adventure called Beyond Fury in 2019. And both feature actual, genuine Italian cult horror legend Giovanni Lombardo Radici, who is known as his alias John Morgan, who's in Cannibal Ferox and City Living Dead and Cannibal Apocalypse. So he eventually hooked up with one of the real guys, so that's good for him.
Yeah, that must be good.
But yeah, this is slightly older than kids making a movie. A plot is a guy is possessed by some kind of demon, calls his friend for help, kills his friend. In the meantime, the thing that possessed him in the first place, some kind of document, is set on fire, so he dies too. Then his dad comes home, accidentally gets blood in the demon's mouth, and the whole thing starts all over again. And it ends with a freeze frame. I'm not convinced this was film. Not shot on film. It might have been 8mm, but you can't tell.
I see.
It's just too hard to tell. But it was definitely done by just people in their yard. But it fits the spirit of the podcast. It's really a huge homage to Lamberto Bava's Demons overall.
Does it steal any gags or anything like that?
They try really hard with the bladder effect transformations. The bits in Demons where the demon's claws grow out from under regular fingers. He does a decent version of that. The mask of the person who is possessed is really fun. It moves when the actor can squint his eyes or move his forehead. So they made it so the eyes of the mask actually react. Which is pretty impressive, I thought. It reminded me most of Shrek from our first podcast.
That's about to say.
not the DreamWorks animated film,
right?
But the film about guys who are joking around and accidentally invoke a dead Nazi war criminal who then starts killing people. This one is a little less dialogue heavy. It's more just going from one moment to the other. It's short in that regard. More, actual parents like showing up, like older people just doing their best, having a good time. Looked like it was fun. It will probably never have a boutique label reissue because he steals all kinds of copyrighted popular rock music. There's a Depeche Mode song. There's a couple cult songs. And funnily enough, he steals the exact same Claudio Simonetti song that the Compton guy was ripping off, Killing from Demons. And then there's also a short bit where a character's watching the bullet through the peephole bit from opera. So there's just too much copyright stuff. They're just never going to be able to do it. So, yeah. But it was fun. Yeah, this one's on YouTube too. Paura il Diavolo.
The next film we were not able to track down, Evil Night from 1992. It's directed by Todd Jason Cook, and he did a whole bunch of these sort of horror trash movies in the 90s. It does have on his website, all of his movies are available on DVD, and he has a pretty tempting offer where he's like, hey, look, I'll make your own box set out of these movies. I will send you I will send you 6 DVDs for $30 plus shipping. And I'm sure it's just like 6 burned DVDs in a cardboard box or whatever. And
probably.
And he has, I think, like 4 different versions of Evil Knight listed on there. And it's like, oh God, which one is the one I'm supposed to get? I don't know. But this might be, when we do another full SOV episode at some point, this might be a director I return to. He's most famous for like Death Metal Zombies and Demon Dolls. This is a movie about a college prank that goes wrong. Victim unlocks an evil personality. He goes on a rampage. It's just a bunch of like creative kills. It's just like, what's an unusual way to kill someone sort of stuff. I've seen some praise for the industrial techno soundtrack, and I don't know, it seems like people enjoy it. It's a good time. The next movie, I think I'm the only one who saw. Humanoids from Atlantis. Oh, good. I'm glad you did not subject yourself to this now. J.W. Bookwalter is a person. JR, my goodness. I was about to call him a personal friend of mine, which is absolutely not true, but obviously not true if I don't know his name. J.R. Bookwalter made Kingdom of the Vampires, which I really enjoyed last time we did this, and Ozone, which is a movie that I watched this time and I really enjoyed. He is a talented filmmaker under low-budget circumstances. Generally speaking, Humanoids from Atlantis is such a whiff. It's such a non-effort. It's unfinished, and there's like a little thing at the end in the credits where they're like, here's why this movie sucks and is unfinished, it's literally the thing that Mark Bouchard says in American Movie. It's like, you can't have something on screen that says, well, I'm sorry, we couldn't get this shot because this or whatever. Like J.R. Bookwalter's like, on the other hand, what if you did? It's an unfinished movie that they just put a bunch of really bad filler in order to stretch it to a length where you could sell it on videotape. That includes an introduction that's 3 minutes long. It's like 60 words. It takes 3 minutes to scroll through. There are 3 different points where you have a little ellipses, followed by 10 seconds of nothing, followed by the end of the sentence with a sort of a closed ellipses of, for example, in the years that followed, many of the Earth's most brilliant minds have combed the ocean floor in search of a long-lost city, ... Then you wait 15 seconds, and then it says, and the possibility of any survivors, ... And then there's another 15 seconds, and then the scroll continues. And it's like, you can't do that. You can't. It's got real Uwe Boll's Alone in the Dark energy at the start. It's got the really irritating shot and video thing where it's like, this is about a teenage guy who loves horror movies and he wants to make horror movies. And he is always arguing with his girlfriend because his girlfriend's like, why do you want to watch Home Alone? And then he's like, nah, bro, Evil Dead 2. So among the movies that they discuss as they are sort of necking by the lake, they have he says he's working on a documentary about the lake. He has a conversation about Romero's Image 10 Days. So it's like, oh God, this is like the start of the movie. We're really in for it. He has an Evil Dead 2 hat. He has a Gremlins 2 shirt. They debate the quality of Night Riders. He hates Home Alone. He said that Darkman is just okay. It's so annoying, irritating. At some point, the Atlantean creature of the body is found by the scientist. It escapes. There's a lot of dopey humor. Let's see. There's like a scene where there's 2 stoner characters in their car that goes on forever, and the monster kind of looks like just someone in a Star Trek mask, wearing a tunic with a sparkly gold bandana. It's got a little bit of, I think it's Revenge of the Creature from the Black Lagoon, the second Creature in the Black Lagoon movie, where it just turns into the creature wandering the countryside, like terrorizing teenagers and necking in cars. It kind of does that move. There's a Kingdom of the Vampires reference. At some point, she's wearing a sweatshirt that is a reference to one of his old movies. The filmmaker gets a check for this documentary about the lake he's watching, and he goes, now I can get a copy of Ghoul School, and which is another like direct-to-video horror movie from that era. There's a reference to Chick Boxer 2, which J.R. Bookwalter plays the video store owner in a scene in Chick Boxer. So it's just like, it's so irritating and navel-gazing, and there's a lot of arbitrary like plot twists about the scientist is actually the queen of Atlantis, and she wasn't studying the creature, she was trying to use it for world domination.
I gotta respect him being sort of shady towards Darkman, just because rather famously Sam Raimi put a bunch of money into helping Bookwalter finish his first movie with The Dead Next Door. So the idea that he's not just idol worshiping this guy that's this cool guy, I don't know. I think that's kind of a baller move.
I don't. It's irritating. Well, it's in a movie that is absent everything else. Like there's a scene
Yeah.
where they get video camera footage of the monster, and they go to the sheriff, and the sheriff doesn't believe them, and then she has the tape, and it is like a 10-minute scene of her just hanging out in her living room watching scenes from another Bookwalter movie. I think it might be Robot Ninja. I can't say for sure, but she like has a room that is clearly Bookwalter's living room because she just has a million videotapes in it, and she's got a Betamax player, and there's the best part of the movie is where you get to see all the vintage like media and her gorgeous like brushed nickel Betamax player that she puts the tape in. But then at the end, they do a thing where they're like, oh, we ran out of money, we couldn't finish the movie. So right at the climactic fight scene, it's sort of like one of the characters accidentally gets punched for real, and then he breaks character and he has a British accent. And he's like, bloody mate, this stunt man punched me. Oh, this is never gonna work. And it's revealed that everything you were watching was actually a fictional movie. And
What?
then the last 6 minutes of this are credits, which includes 4 minutes of additional credits after the fact. So this is another movie that Bookwalter sort of released afterwards, and this does not have the same monkeying around that Kingdom of the Vampire and Ozone has. There's not much he can really do, and this is where he says this was shot in 3 days. So a lot of these movies, you watch it and you're like, I wonder what equipment they used, and I wonder like how much money this was made for. And in this case, for sure, because he puts it right in the end credits. He goes, this was shot for 3 days in Super VHS-C in March of 1992 for a budget of $1,250. And 75% of the original screenplay was discarded because of inclement weather and the original distributor's ludicrous release schedule. So we had to pull the rest out of our ass. Like, it's a dumb movie. Don't watch it. It's and not in a fun way. It has the same like little kids making a movie energy, except it's obnoxious and
it's an adult who we know can do better.
And also there's no local charm to anything, which is like Bookwalter is not someone who just sort of shoots in the neighborhood and like gets a lot of weird texture. And in this case, that's like massively to his detriment. So don't watch Humanoids from Atlantis. Our next movie, on the other hand, kind of cool and worth checking out. Death Magic from 1992. I was a fan.
Yeah, this is actually the reason that we did this podcast. I don't know if Patrick even knows this, but shortly after we did the first one, Jim Laskowski tagged me in a Dawn of the Discs post about Culture Shock doing this movie, Death Magic, on Blu-ray. And one of the owners of Culture Shock contacted me and said, why were you tagged in this? What are you doing? I told him about the podcast. He said, oh, we're going to be doing this, blah, blah, blah. Year later, I found out it was shot in Tucson, where I grew up. So regular listeners know that I absolutely have to talk about any cult movie shot around my hometown, which I left on purpose because I didn't enjoy living there anymore. But we still got to talk about it. It just, as a follow-up of that, there's been, I actually contacted the guy on Twitter or Facebook, and he said that they still haven't, there's been some issues with the transfer. And I just found out that the director died very recently, as in like a couple months ago. So I don't know if they're going to finish what they were doing or not. I haven't asked, but that's kind of sad. Anyway, shot in Tucson, Death Magic, despite not mentioning a bunch of landmarks, it's still very much a regional filmmaking thing. If you've have ever been to Tucson in the 90s, if Tim Lucas makes another Nightmare USA, this will be a good Southern Arizona reference. The only other one I can think of that matches this is there's a Super 8 or 16 millimeter movie called Nataz the Reflection about Satan worshippers out in the Tucson desert. I'm actually surprised there aren't more movies like this shot out there because Tucson is an easy place to shoot westerns. They have a whole bunch of set up stages and sets um, that have been used over the years. The big one is Old Tucson Studios, which was erected in 1939 for a Wesley Ruggles movie called Arizona from 1940. And then they just kept it up and set a backlot, and they used it for Gunsmoke, Rawhide, Wanted Dead or Alive, Little House on the Prairie, couple pretty big deal John Wayne and Clint Eastwood movies. And they continued using it throughout the 90s when this was made. Tombstone and Geronimo both came out in 93, were shot partially there. The whole thing burned down in 95. They rebuilt it, and then it was closed for COVID and hasn't opened since. There was just the other day, maybe 2 days ago, it was announced that a new company bought it and is going to be turning it more into, like, it's always had visitors, but they're going to be turning it more into like a theme park instead of a place where you go and watch people get in fake shootouts on the street and stuff like that. I don't know if any of Death Magic was shot there, but it is a Western and there are some older setups in a couple places.
It jumps back and forth between Civil War era and contemporary, and all the contemporary stuff happens at night, so you honestly don't see a lot of the environment.
It's funny though, like I recognize the Outback Steakhouse and stuff like that.
Wow. Okay.
But yeah, there's some really nice shots of the Rincon Mountains, but I'm not clever enough to like triangulate where they were shooting from based on the angle of the mountains. And again, there are a lot of places they could have shot that some are even authentic. There's some old Adobe buildings and stuff that still exist all around town. So that's one advantage shooting there. The advantage there is you have actual cowboys, and you have a whole bunch of people employed by Old Tucson Studio to act as cowboys and shoot and ride and all that stuff. So I assume a lot of the performers had something to do with Old Tucson Studios, but at the same time, they're supposed to be Civil War performers, so they might have been one of the Civil War reenactor clubs that are in that area too.
That was the vibe I got, because the production value is such that this is not director Paul Clinco going out and buying everyone these costumes. These are people who, oh yeah, I already have a Confederate costume, it turns out.
Yeah. And so they get a lot of production value out of that kind of stuff about the area. It's something that uses the desert pretty well for the flashbacks, which
the plot of the movie is a satanic cult, which has recently established a new leader, then split off from their old leader. They go out into the desert to perform a ritual to resurrect an evil spirit, and in this case, it is this violent, racist Civil War general who was court-martialed and hung. Not the one of the interesting wrinkles of the script that I enjoyed was he is not executed because of his crimes against the Native Americans who are doing no one any harm and those genocidal things. It's because of the white people who tell him no, all get shot, and then those are the people's deaths that he has to answer for.
Right, which is unfortunately probably historically accurate.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I do think it's very fun to have a horror movie where the opposition is the sort of racist imperialist military of the 19th century versus the more or less good guy. I mean, they're somewhat amoral, they're anti-heroes, but like they're more or less the protagonist good guy Satanists. Because they at least are from the 20th century and are like, hey, this is a bad person, and when we resurrected him, we recognized that his deeds were terrible.
Yeah, they're definitely in that in over their head type Satan cult. Like, it reminded me a bit of like Dracula AD 1972.
Yes.
But instead of Dracula, it's a crazy Civil War general.
Yes, there are two characters who die very early on who are very much we think this stuff is cool, we don't necessarily believe it. And then that's why they have to be the ones to die first on to be, to pay for those sins or whatever. What is the name of... So there are the two competing leaders. There's Donald Graham, played by Norman Stone. And then I think, so the killer is Major Aaron Parker. That makes Keith DeGreen Powell Davidson. And Keith DeGreen plays the sort of new upstart satanic cult leader. He sucks so much. So the thing about this movie is it has good production value. It's another movie that looks like it's shot with soap opera cameras, and again, because of the Civil War reenactors and stuff, like the production value in those flashback sequences is very startling and surprising. You get this like one nice camera dolly that shows this whole crowd watching this execution scene, and you're like, wow, this is the kind of value you did not get in a shot on video horror movie. And then it's also ambitious script wise because it actually has like complicated character dynamics and this history that you as an audience member are sort of just parsing out as it goes on. It doesn't stop and explain everything. I'm not saying it's, you know, a brilliant script or anything. It's not Patty Chayefsky or anything, but it is like it is more sophisticated and more nuanced and subtle than you normally get out of shot on video horror, where you get these sort of power dynamics. You have these like love triangles. You have these. It's an interesting vibe within the satanic cult where the new leader, played by Keith DeGreen, like you get the idea that they're very libertine, sexually liberated, like just they're all fucking each other kind of a thing. But Keith DeGreen, because he has his position of power, he doesn't want to settle for that. He also wants these women that he has slept with in this group to like love him. And there's this weird push-pull dynamic between him and a couple of the different women where he's like, maybe he has more feelings and he's letting on, and he's trying to like, you know, back them into admitting that they have feelings for him. It's this whole thing where you go, wow, okay, for characters in a shot on video horror movie, this is kind of sophisticated. I mean, even for a regular horror movie about resurrecting an evil Civil War general who becomes a supernatural slasher, like this is a sophisticated script. And then it's totally let down because all their performances are terrible, especially Keith DeGreen, who his vibe is like, I would cast him as the kid in the kids movie who goes, I can't help it, I have asthma. Like he just has this like
he's
total twerpy, irritating like younger brother energy.
He's the guy in a slasher movie who tries to flirt with a girl, they hate him, and then he ends up getting killed, and we're kind of glad that he got killed.
Yeah, except he doesn't have the personality of Shelley from Friday the 13th Part 2.
Right. He's like Shelley if Shelley was like a very like an even less important character.
Yeah.
He is like
and on the one hand, something I really like about this movie, and I don't know if this is intentional or not, this could just be a byproduct on the pool of actors that they are working from, but I love that this is a satanic cult made up of dorks.
Yep, because they use a computer.
Yeah.
They use a computer program to figure out the best time to do their ritual based on star charts.
You get the feeling that like Donald Graham and Powell Davidson, these two like competing cult leaders, they both have positions at a local university. Like Powell has written these papers on the Wild West, and that's how he knows about this general. And like you get this vibe, like it's never spelled out, but you kind of can piece together in your head, okay, she was a student, she was part of the faculty, like this is how this satanic cult got put together. And when you look at like actual, you know, documentaries, especially like from the 80s and stuff and 90s about like pagan groups and satanic groups and stuff, they are just like, oh, they're just well-meaning dorks who, you know, enjoy older religions. And like I do like that, but it's such a shame that there's so much attention spent on the power dynamics and the character relationships between all these characters, and just every performance is terrible.
Yeah, they were definitely to speak in Tucsonese. He was probably working at Pima Community College, not the University of Arizona. No insult.
How many audience members
as
love
a
that
graduate of Pima Community College? I'm not meaning to insult those of us who wanted a slightly cheaper education.
Gabe, I'm going to ask you a question, and I want an honest answer. Were you ever in a pagan polycule?
No.
That tried to resurrect evil spirits?
No, I had a psychology teacher who was so Christian that every time we would cover something that mentioned humans as animals, he would have to stop the class and let us know that he doesn't believe humans are animals. That was my community college experience.
At the same time, though, you can see how that environment would lead people to be like, we should start a satanic cult.
Yeah. Well, it reminded me also of the Ripper has an actual teacher in charge of this thing. the shot on video one that has Tom Savini in it for like 10 seconds is an actual college. Like this could be taking place just at a different college,
right?
But again, it's got to be Pima community. There's no way the U of A would have these guys.
Excellent. So I mean, the plot is basically they don't have control of the spirit. Is the Dracula AD situation where this spirit is now he has his own axe to grind, which is that he is going to kill all of the descendants of the people who sentenced him to death.
Which is basically Freddy Krueger's bit.
Yeah, and he's basically Freddy Krueger. He appears, he sort of does a one-liner, or at the very least, he will cackle, and he'll do a double impalement. He has a Civil War sword, so most of the deaths are sword.
He does the twitch of the death nerve Friday the 13th Part 2 double impalement.
The other thing about this movie is if there is a woman in the movie, you will see her naked at some point. There's so much nudity. It's I mean, it is a byproduct of like, yeah, part of their ritual is just like they're all in robes and stuff, and so it's just a lot of naked women in robes like getting impaled or whatever. The only woman who's not get naked is the delightfully geriatric homicide detective who is following this trail of death that this Civil War general is going on. She's clearly like someone's mom or someone.
Yeah.
She is not an actor, and you don't know why she particularly got cast the homicide detective, but as soon as you see it, you go, I'd see more movies where we had a geriatric woman as a homicide detective. Yeah. It was a lot of fun.
With her specifically, the adventures of, I don't remember what, they actually shot some scenes inside one of the police precincts. Like you could see that they're actually in it. And I'm pretty sure the cops, the really, really incompetent moron cops are being played by actual on-duty cops because they have the full costumes and they have the look and they aren't actors. They're very clearly not actors. That real cops would be like, oh yeah, I'll play a moron. I'll look totally inept for your straight to video horror movie. Awesome, man.
So it's a thing where the murder scenes are kind of fun because there's a smoke machine and there's red lights, and I'm an easy mark.
Good light. Cool lighting, man.
And then the scenes where you go back to the satanic cult who are trying to figure out what's going on, those are less fun, partially because this whole movie is shot so dark that you really struggle to make out people's faces, let alone the performances and stuff. And again, they're all bad actors. So there's a lot about this movie I admire more than I actually enjoyed watching it.
I actually liked the unlikability of the cast because the love quadrangle, I guess it's not even a triangle, there's four of them, is treated so dramatically, and every one of them is painted as, except for one, there's like one likable character in the whole thing, the one woman who of course dies. They're all so unlikable, and that way on purpose, that it's fascinating to me that they really want us to be involved with their drama. Like we're supposed to really care about what's happening to them, but at the same, I don't know. I was fascinated by that.
Yeah,
but you're right.
Again, there's an ambition to it.
It drags. For me, there was one really funny bit where the hero, Keith the Green guy, steals books from an utterly normal looking library that has an armed guard inexplicably, and he has to like hide, and he has to cast a spell so the guard doesn't see him. And it's just like he's just in the children's section or some shit. Like it's just they don't even have like if you shot this in Chicago, or you could shoot it at a library that looked somewhat gothic.
Yeah,
you shoot it in Tucson, it's just not happening. They're all single level little like buildings. Like there's just nothing to it. I thought it was very funny. But I mean, and the house where they spend most of the movie looks like 90% of my friends in the early 90s, that was their parents' house. Like it's such a funnily stereotypical house for the place and that I did. If the off chance that any local Tucson people are listening and you can find this, which again, it's supposed to come out on Blu-ray, which might fix the fact that it's too dark to tell what's going on.
That's true.
If they shot it with enough light and it's just a bad transfer, maybe it would have
If this
improved.
is a movie that, you know, subtitles clear up some of the issues of keeping track of the surprisingly complicated character relationships, and, you know, a Blu-ray transfer fix the lighting, this might be really a fun discovery for a lot of people.
Yeah, so I hope that Culture Shock does get to do it. Yeah, I just looked it up. The director died on May 1st of this year, 2022. So that sucks. Um, but yeah, if you are from Tucson and you can find this, watch this. It's
the next film
so
we sadly neither of us saw. It's unclear if this is actually streaming anywhere or not, because Roku has a bunch of channels that seem like phantom channels that, like, you give them $3.99 and maybe there's give you something in return. But anyway, this one I was disappointed about because it's the Polonia brothers. Oh,
it's our boys.
it's our boys from Hallucinations and Splatter Farm that I love so
And
dearly.
they look like adults in this picture.
Kind of.
Like
It's
93.
I
They would have been at
I
least
I
18.
watched a little bit of I watched a little bit of Feeders to see if that was analog or not, and I think it's digital video.
Uh-huh.
But I watched a little bit of Feeders, and which it came out after this, and the Polonia who is in that, it's like, oh god, this is a very awkward age for you. Anyway, they play house sitters. They have to solve the mystery of the small town killer. I think it's like based on the Jersey Devil myth from New Jersey. Most people seem to have the same thing to say about it, which is it's more boring than the average Polonia brother movie. So maybe I'm not missing out on too much, but it does have the same hangout vibe.
Yeah.
The next movie is America's Deadliest Home Video. Did you get a chance to see this?
I didn't. I couldn't find it.
This is streaming on the Alamo Drafthouse streaming service, so you can rent it for $3 there. America's Deadliest Home Video is a found footage movie, which is very exciting and cool. A very early example of a found footage movie. You know, this is mockumentaries are sort of in the same boat or whatever, but this one is dedicated to being 100% found footage and even does some playful things with it. It starts off, and I thought it was going to be absolutely terrible because the lead is Danny Bonaducci, who we were talking about celebrities who have been in shot on video horror movies, and this is, I will say, is the other movie that it's a stretch to say it's horror. If I went into a video store and I saw Man Bites Dog in the horror section, I would go, okay, I'll give it to you. And this is basically someone doing a found footage version, American like daytime talk show version of Man Bites Dog. So it's borderline. It's a dark crime movie, and it gets darker and sort of more horrific as it goes on. So by the end, you can kind of justify it being in this list. But it is so cool that I want to talk about it anyway. It starts off terrible because Danny Bonaducci, one of the most famous people to ever be in a shot-on-video horror movie, is the worst actor in it. And he plays. And I didn't realize what the premise of it. I thought it was going to be a Tim Ritter sort of a thing where it's clear his wife is cheating on him, and he discovers that she's cheating. And I'm like, oh, and then he's going to go on some like killing spree or whatever, and it's going to be about this like guy who got cheated on, and he can show all the women in his life, they're not to mess with him. And he's such an obnoxious dork. I'm like, if I have to spend the whole movie with this guy being like the cool killer guy, I'm going to be so irritated. But what actually happens is he has sort of an existential crisis, and he just gets in his car and drives away, and he just starts driving across America, and he starts doing this weird video diary where he's just kind of awkwardly like pointing out the sights. And he ends up in Wisconsin, and in Wisconsin, as he's doing one of his little video diary segments where he sets up the camera and talks to it, in the background, he catches accidentally on video a car being pushed into a quarry, and it's a real car being pushed into a quarry, and it doesn't explode, but it does get crushed and stuff. So that's a cool bit of production value for a shot on video movie. And then the criminals that did it, that sort of put the brick on the pedal and put the car into the quarry and see him do it, they kidnap him, and the leader kind of likes the idea of someone with a video camera recording their crime spree. And so he kind of gets conscripted into this gang and follows them around as they go on a crime spree. What's the name? It's Clint is the leader. He's this sort of psychopathic, charismatic kind of gang leader kind of guy. He gets more psychopathic and crazy as it goes on. We have Melina Williams as Vesna. She's this black woman who's just absolutely blood crazy. And her solution to everything is like, let's kill him. And then there is Melora Walters, who plays Gloria, and Gloria is like sort of the like sweet natured, you know, she's along for the ride, but she doesn't have a bad heart. At heart she's still a good person. She's just mixed up with a bad crowd type, and she gets kind of sweet for Danny Bonaducci's character, and he follows them around as they, you know, hold up a liquor store, they rob a gas station. There's murders, but it's like you hear gunshots off screen, and then the guy who owns the gas station wanders on screen with blood makeup on him and collapses, and they have to go. But the whole thing is fair. I mean, other than the fact that the performances are kind of bad, luckily the gang are all better actors than Danny Bonaducci. The woman, Melora Walters, she plays the mom in the Hulu show Pen 15, which I love. So not the Japanese mom. I can't remember the character names in Pen 15, but she plays the mom in that. So if you ever want to see the mom in that in a super low budget horror movie where she gets tied to a motel bed, then yeah, America's Deadliest Home Video is that.
That's the one for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is the sort of man bites dog thing where as it goes on, Danny Bonaducci sort of gets more and more complicit in their crimes. And hold on, I have some. I wrote down the information about like when everything came out. Where oh yeah, okay. So points of inspiration. It's primarily Man Bites Dog because that played at the New York Film Festival the year this came out, or a year before this came out. But also it's like the videotape scene from Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. This came out the same year as Menace to Society, which also took influence in one subplot from Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. This came out 1 year before Natural Born Killers, which this has some connective tissue with. And of course, the main thing, and it becomes it's sort of simmering in the background, and then becomes very real in the final scene. The main point of inspiration is the birth of American reality TV with Cops. And this feels like it's shot with the same sort of video cameras that Cops was shot on. He falls in love with the Gloria character, but the gang leader Clint sort of makes some things like, hey, if you want her, I'm almost done with her, you can have her. And he's like, I don't know if you're just testing me and you're gonna kill me, and so he's a little afraid to be with her. It gets darker. The murders get more arbitrary and more violent. They rob a video store. Before they rob the person working at the video store, the customer before them is renting Stroker Ace, and the video store employee's like, yeah, that movie's great. And that's like the sort of cue to the audience that it's like, oh, America's so stupid. They like these stupid movies. And then the Clint comes up and he's like, do you have Bonnie and Clyde? And she's like, I've never heard of that movie. And he's like, fuck you, and kills her and kills the owner and everything. There's a scene where Gloria and Danny Bonaducci's character sort of plot to escape and run out. Clint finds out and he ties her to the bed and is going to videotape himself killing her. And he tells the story of seeing a snuff film when he was young. And he tells in graphic detail, we don't see it obviously because it sticks to the found footage format, but he does describe in graphic detail the story of a mentally disabled Mexican woman being tied to a tree and dismembered. It's just like, it's a very disturbing scene. It's a very good monologue. And it's this moment where obviously the format of the found footage thing, it is tying back into, myths about the snuff films and things like that. And that being sort of the inception point of where he becomes a psychopath or whatever, it makes it an interesting wrinkle. At a certain point, Dougie bursts into the bedroom right before he kills Gloria. They knock Clint out. They escape. Gloria takes the video camera with her because she wants to keep recording because she's a little kooky or whatever. They get pulled over by the cops, and they get pulled over by cops who are as part of an episode of Cops. I forget the name of I wrote down the name of the fake cop show is Real Lawmen. So at a certain point, the camera switches and you get the TV show footage rather than their video camera footage, and it cuts back and forth, which is like an absolutely great like last scene little wrinkle that is, it's the kind of thoughtful approach to the medium and to the potentials of the medium that you I always want when I see a found footage movie, and I rarely get.
Yeah, exactly. I know. Yeah, I know what you mean. That like just describing that made me go, "Oh yeah, cool."
And
Because
Clint catches up with them. He kills the cops in a shootout. They basically have like a Bonnie and Clyde situation where Clint and Vesna and Gloria all die. More cops show up, and then it cuts back to the camera crew from the cops show. Like, it cuts back to the video camera, Dougie's video camera in the trunk of the car, filming him as the camera crew from the cop show films him, and that's like the last shot. And it's this like it just sort of lingers on it for 10 seconds or so, and it's an amazing final shot. It's got its issues. It's got some dumb script moments. It's got some bad performances. But like as someone saying, "Hey, I could do Man Bites Dog in Wisconsin," like, yeah, they kind of did. They did
yeah,
it.
yeah,
So America's Deadliest Home Videos. There's definitely parts that are really creepy and disturbing. A horror movie might be a stretch, but definitely worth checking out nonetheless. Um, Red Spirit Lake is the next movie from 1993, directed by Charles Pinion. I absolutely loved this one.
another one we meant to cover on the other podcast and couldn't find in time or something like that. Uh, and it's been released on Blu-ray from Vinegar Syndrome. Oh no, I should say Saturn's Core, which is one of Vinegar Syndrome's partner labels.
Right.
And so my note here was this is probably what you think you want when you say you're going to watch an underground horror movie. Like this is the kind of thing that I would have been looking for on VHS when I was in college, because it feels so strange and so forbidden, but is also well done enough that you feel like they know what they're doing. So the really transgressive stuff and the really upsetting stuff, that they are actors acting, performers performing kind of situation. So you're like there's certain low budget or underground horror where you're just not sure the people being raped and murdered are really enjoying the performance.
Yes.
And this is one of those cases where it's like that this group effort, and it feels like, yeah, if it's one of those things that like at the risk of cheaping it's like an art movie that knows what it's doing. It still has a sense of humor and is trying to just be gross sometimes just for the sake of it.
And sexy. And yeah.
Yeah.
And this sort of comes from the world of the New York underground film scene, the cinema of transgression, specifically Richard Kern, who's a big name in cinema of transgression. He has a sort of notable role, but everyone involved has also, like, most of the actors have also directed movies or starred in these kinds of movies that are sort of intersecting with underground films and like fetish photography and this sort of whole world. And I once read a book on cinema of transgression forever ago, but the thing about it is none of those movies are like readily available to watch. So it was a thing I read and was like, oh, that'd be interesting to follow up on. And I never have in the 20 years since I read that book. So it's hard for me to be to speak too much about it. But this definitely is a movie about like rubbing your face in just like really aggressive, sexual assault scenes and just like so much nudity, but then like immediately cutting to like very bucolic, beautiful like witches in the past who have lived at this Red Spirit Lake property that this young woman inherits. Like, you see them having like a tea break and stuff, and it's like very clear in a way that a lot of sort of sleazier shot on video movies aren't, that like this is a movie that is getting behind the witches and getting behind like that spirit of like, what if we could just have our own little place where we could be ourselves and tell everyone else to fuck off. And there you get a lot of these little visions that this young woman, Marilyn, who also plays her aunt, who is killed in the first scene, played by Annabelle Davies. You get these like, she gets these recurring visions of these like witches doing these little lovely little dances out in the snow and stuff like that. It's really well edited. It's got a really good pace to it. It's got a really good sense of humor. This is one of the first ones I watched, so unfortunately, this is one of the ones where my memory is the least specific. It's not on the level of Shatter Dead, which is the one that we watched last time that I was like, oh, this is like a great, one of the great horror films, period.
Right,
This
but
doesn't really.
but Shatter Dead approaches like it. Shatter Dead is like one of those movies that almost that goes beyond the fact that it's shot on video. Like you can like this feels like what I want for specifically shot on video underground horror. Whereas like Shatter Dead is like just a smart underground horror movie. Like you don't need the aesthetic. I don't know. I might not be explaining myself right now, but like Shatter Dead transcends
Yeah.
shot on video.
Well, Shatter Dead
Whereas
has a
this,
lot on its mind. Shatter Dead is a really
yeah,
film that's really dense with meaning. This is really dense with a vibe.
yeah.
This is not
Well,
like secretly a metaphor for anything. This is just about, like this sort of punk ideology of like, what if we could just have this fucking lake house in the middle of nowhere where no one could bother us, and we could have our friends over and we could all have sex and get drunk and, chill out in the sauna. And then there's these like evil real estate developers who are trying to come and fuck it all up. And it's like, man, those guys suck. And they're all rapists.
yeah.
And, and then every rapist in this movie gets a appropriate comeuppance at the end in a way where the witches win. And it's like it feels very now, like it feels like a lot of
Right.
movies
That's
now
my note.
of feminism being depicted via like witches striking back against the sort of misogynist power structures around them is definitely the vibe of this movie.
That's what I wrote down. Is it feels the most modern, and beyond that, it feels like the artiness that recent art house horror movies that get big budge when they premiere on Shudder or whatever. The sort of faux retroism that those movies are trying to have is really this. Like everybody always ties those movies back to John Carpenter and stuff like that, like because they have the droniness. But this is like what they're actually, even if whether they know it or not, this is what a lot of movies are actually trying to evoke with their sort of depressing vibe, as you said, and then the way that they contrast violence with stillness and nature. In a way, this is like a folk horror cyberpunk movie that keeps taking breaks for a kind of redneck horror uh, thing that feels more like a regular straight to video horror movie.
And then like
Where
also like almost like pinup sequences where it's just like, and then
yeah,
here's some cheesecake for you, like here's a beautiful naked woman writhing around in a sauna.
yeah, yeah, and full frontal men too. I mean,
This
it's
is
not, they're not shot as lovingly, but
right. Death Magic has a lot of naked women, and despite the men also being naked under their robes, you don't get any male nudity. But this movie does have very attractive men who are fully nude as well. So it is like that's part of the world as well. Um,
yeah,
so I don't. It's just yeah. It's but like very specifically, the thing it does share with Shatter Dead is which sort of for me makes it exceptional and maybe better than a lot of like the quote unquote A24 elevated horror or whatever you want to say, is that it
mhm,
doesn't sacrifice its sense of humor. It doesn't sacrifice its glee for gore. It doesn't sacrifice an irreverence that you associate with underground films. Like the first thing to go in an A24-esque kind of a thing is the sense of humor. The first
yeah,
thing to go is a playfulness. Peter Strickland is like the one guy who is actually able to like push through that
and has a sense of
and
humor.
have a sense
Yeah,
of humor and also like to an extent be inspired by the world of fetish photography and stuff the way this is.
hmm,
But like all those other movies are just they're just so self-serious because an audience that doesn't like horror movies but does like art films, they take goofiness as like mistakes. And this is a movie that says no, that's an important part of the aesthetic, important part of getting across the message of the movie. So Red Spirit Lake was a movie that I was like, am I going to buy? Because there was a Vinegar Syndrome sale recently, and
yeah,
I was like, knew got this podcast coming up, and I'm like, am I going to buy Red Spirit Lake on Blu-ray? And it was pretty expensive, and I had never seen a Charles Pinion movie. And I was just like, I don't know if I can fork it over unseen for this. And now that I've seen it, I'm like, oh, I got to get this Blu-ray because I got to see this other Charles Pinion movie.
yeah. We await
We Await, which
is also
is I've heard sold as Texas Chainsaw Massacre in the City, which is like, please, yes, thank you.
More of that. I also think, and it might just have been on my mind at the time, but they're definitely in the redneck horror part of it, like the people that are in the area. So not the main characters who are, middle class people staying in this farmhouse. The people who like live in the surrounding farmhouses, their mythology, where one of them can like see the future, and they are easily possessed, but so they're good guys and bad guys in certain areas. That and the fact that they used lounge jazz music during some of the most violent assaults made me think that they were also going for a Twin Peaks thing, because this
Oh,
would have been
yes.
just a little after Twin Peaks had its quote peak, I guess.
I think Twin Peaks was another thing that came to mind when I was watching this as well.
It's like, yeah, I mean, as soon as you're having assaults with loungy jazz music playing, it just, that feels like you gotta be.
And the mix of like the sweetness and innocence of some of those like witchy flashback things with like
Yeah,
when things do get aggressive and violent, they get like really uncomfortable. The,
right.
the move Charles Pinion returns to is, you know what you can't fake is an actress's breast being grabbed, and so there's a lot of very aggressive groping of
Yeah.
actors in a way that is just like you can't. This is not a typical cheesecake shot. This is something more unpleasant and aggressive.
And it has some special effects. I mean, it's had some gore effects. I don't think I would not have been disappointed if I had been 18 and rented this specifically for the fact that I assumed it would be transgressive. I wouldn't have been disappointed by the violent level of violence.
No, by the end they get there. Yeah, man cuts
Yeah.
his own penis off. That's not nothing.
Yep.
It's a pretty good. It's a pretty good cutting
That's
your own
not
penis
nothing.
off effect. It's not nothing. That's what he says as he drops
Yeah,
to the
with
ground.
the anal fisting, death by anal fisting thing that you see quoted a lot, and there's actually the cover of the box, is mostly left to our imaginations.
Right.
That one's not particularly graphic. It's got a lot going on. It's not easy to watch.
No, it is.
Uh,
It is aggressive, and it does rub your face in it in a way that is, if you're
yeah,
if you're just looking to vibe out and have a good time, you're probably gonna want to lean closer to something like Demon Queen. But I do like
yeah.
that punk energy that Red Spirit Lake has.
That moves us on to a good J.R. Bookwalter film.
Ozone,
We're
yeah.
not just gonna, yeah, we're not just gonna dump on the guy.
Now,
He
granted,
can,
like Kingdom of the Vampire that we talked about the last time we did SOV episodes, J.R. Bookwalter um, has re-released all of his movies, and what that has unfortunately done is it's had the sort of George Lucas effect of erasing the originals, because
yeah,
he has re-edited them. He's added new titles. He's added computer CGI effects that he's enhanced them with. He's re-edited them, and they have a different pace now and different music. And so when we say that Ozone is a really cool, competent, interesting cop mystery, weird like drug cult movie or whatever, we're not talking about the version from 1994, which may be, but maybe it isn't. The version that's on
yeah.
Tubi is 1994.
So I didn't really talk about Bookwalter very much because I hadn't seen Humanoids from Atlantis, um, but he is sort of a one man machine, and he's got I mean, he's sort of on the level of a one man trauma, uh, but he manages to hire professional actors, and he has a lot of ambition no matter what he's doing. His first movie, The Dead Next Door, is the most expensive Super 8 movie ever made, and it was basically, that movie was made over, like, I don't even know how many years it took him to finish it, and that was like his film school. And then he never got his big budget, but he knew what he was doing from there on out, is the best way to put it. So Ozone is the last of the Humanoids from Atlantis, Ozone, the Sandman, which neither of us saw, and uh, vampire one,
Kingdom of the Vampires.
Kingdom of the Vampires. Those were all. I actually contacted him on Twitter because he had contacted me before, and just to make sure. And he says those were all shot using the same JVC Super VHS C camera, and that after the Sandman, he started shooting mini DV. So, Ozone, since we haven't seen the Sandman, Ozone is sort of like the ultimate SOV movie for this guy. It's not to be confused with Ozone: Attack of the Redneck Mutants, which is itself not to be confused with the Redneck Zombies, which was also shot on video and is an actual Trumbull release.
So this movie, it's got, when we say it's very professional, it's like it's got really good lighting. It's got a lot of good colored gel lighting, which is always looks good on shot on video. It's got cover. It's just one of those things where you're like, this is a movie that has coverage. They do close-ups and medium shots, and when they edit between them, it's not awkward. Holy shit! But it's like, for the world of SOV, it is a whole different vibe. It is a slickness that you don't get used to. There's good effects. There's good. In fact, the effects where he didn't go back and like mess around with CGI after the fact look better, because the CGI has dated much more than these sort of
course,
blood spurting, sort of goopy bladder, pulsating skin kind of effects that is very good. It opens with a drug user buying some drugs. He buys them from a guy who looks like Peter Lorre from Mad Love, so we get another movie reference. This one a little older than any of the ones that were in Humanoids from Atlantis. He does a drug and it explodes his head, and I'm pretty sure they did it the same way as Scanners, where they just shot a shotgun under a fake head, and it looks fantastic.
It flops the same way that the Scanners one does, doesn't it? Yeah.
So he read the right issue of Fangoria, and it paid off because it's a great kill. We cut to these cops who are sort of investigating this new drug that's tearing up the streets. This is a very rare shot on video movie with a black lead, and he's kind of a professional actor. He has a career after this. You look at him and he doesn't feel awkward. He knows how to, be present on camera and emote and act and all the stuff that, you look at and you're like, okay, this is a guy that if he was, one of the main characters on a cop procedural, you would not bat an eye. He's a professional. And so,
yeah, his name is James Black, and he has a lot of appearances on TV cop procedurals and dramas. And he's also in a friend of the show, Tyler Foster's favorite postmodern horror comedy, Detention, from 2011. But the thing that I found interesting is I'm like, oh, Bookwalter just saved some money to get a professional actor. But no, this is one of his dudes. This guy is a semi-regular. He's in Zombie Cop, Maximum Impact, Galaxy of Dinosaurs, this, Horror Vision, which Bookwalter produced. And so I think that he just was like friends with Bookwalter and loyal to him, but was also kind of coming up in the world as an actor over the years. That just made it even more impressive to me that somebody who's a genuinely good professional actor came out of this. It wasn't just that it wasn't a Danny Bonaducci situation where you got someone who has just fallen so far that you can afford to grab them for your shot on video movie, or Mary Warrenoff, where you're probably just friends with her and she agrees to do one or two lines.
Yeah, so they do a drug bust. It ends in a gunfight. His partner gets eaten by a zombie. He goes to after his partner and barely escapes sort of the place where all the zombies are in this abandoned building. It's all shot very cool and stuff. And it turns into a thing where he has to give up his badge and gun. And he goes rogue, trying to get to the bottom of who killed his partner. And the fun thing about this movie, and this is the very first movie I watched prepping for this, so the exact details of the plot I do not remember very well. But like the fun thing about this movie is you don't really get a strong idea of what is going on, and every new detail is just like, wait a second, what? There's an underground like gladiator fighting that's like in the basement of this bar that's connected to the sewers, and it's like
it just casually turns into Escape from New York. It's really weird.
Yeah, there's Escape from New York. There's a moment that's Body Snatchers. It's 1978. It's a zombie movie, but there's like this weird zombie monster that's sort of this like zombie king that's at the top of the drug this drug ring. The weirdest part of the movie, and this to me, I look at this and go, okay, I think what happened here is that the original version of this movie on VHS just had Achy Breaky Heart playing in the background of this. But when he went back to re-edit the movie, he was like, well, if I'm going to release this on DVD, that's an obvious copyright violation. And he goes, well, right to parody, you don't have to pay the rights to a song if you do a parody of it. There's already been a parody of Achy Breaky Heart called Achy Breaky Song by Weird Al. He doesn't include Weird Al's Achy Breaky Song because, again, that's copyrighted
Copyright.
material. He does a different rip-off parody of Achy Breaky Heart that's the exact same premise of Achy Breaky Song with all new lyrics.
Yeah. It was funny because you told me that, I forgot it. And then I watched this with Christine, and she immediately said, "Is that the Weird Al Achy Breaky Heart?" So she picked it up immediately. I'm not as much of a Weird Al fan as you guys, so I didn't pick. But like I'd forgotten the factoid. But yeah, apparently it was noticeable enough that was the first thing she noticed as the scene
Right. Well,
started.
it's a thing. There's a line that gets repeated where he goes, "I might just kick your ass out the door," and I go, and I just assumed, oh yeah, he has a Weird Al song in the background of this. I guess it's shot on video. He's not worrying about paying anything. And then I heard that line. I'm like, that's not a Weird Al line. And I looked up Achy Breaky Song and I go, this is a totally different thing. So there is, despite this being a kind of professional feeling, serious, weird movie, there is a little bit of that goofy humor and also more of that sort of Bookwalter universe thing where there's a robot ninja poster on the wall
Yeah.
at some point. Like there were robot ninja costumes in Kingdom of the Vampire. And good zombie makeup. There's a good warty kind of zombie sex scene.
Oh, which is very, very surreal, which almost again makes it switch gears. So it's like a cop drama, and then uh, a sort of dystopian, uh, apocalyptic drama, and or action movie, and then yeah, it becomes like a Cronenberg movie. And I'm not using that term lightly. I mean, it really feels like he was trying to do a David Cronenberg kind of body horror sex scene.
We get a zombie baby birth long before the Dawn of the Dead remake.
Yep.
That is exceedingly gross. It's I mean, the fun of this movie is just all of the weird places it goes and the fact that it looks so professional while doing it, while still being shot on video. And it has just like every once in a while, there's a little touch where you go, okay, this is a shot on video horror movie. Like the car that the protagonist drives is this like big, ugly tan car with a big ass dent in the side. It's like, all right, if a direct-to-video movie with a proper budget, like they would never have that car as the lead's car. They always have just like a cool looking normal car or whatever. And there's just little bits here and there where you go, okay, that's goofy. That's some shot on video nonsense. But I enjoyed Ozone quite a bit.
The best thing I can say about it is that a lot of the camera work and the style and the sense of humor reminded me of the very early Peter Jackson, like Bad Taste
Oh yeah,
in
yeah.
particular. And so I picture another world where Bookwalter gets the ability, he's in a community that fosters his talent, and he ends up being the guy who does Lord of the Rings or something like that.
It is
Like,
funny that like Bookwalter, you look at these and you go, there was a path where I guess I don't know his whole biography, but it's like maybe if he had moved to if he had moved to LA instead of sticking where he was or something, there is a path where it's like, and then he starts directing television and he
yeah,
gets his big shot directing a something George Romero produced early '90s, whatever, and like there's another world where J.R. Bookwalter is a name person who Mick Garris invites out to dinner.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I should say that Bad Taste is a very technically impressive movie for how little it costs, but there's still something there that reminded me of the way Peter Jackson used to shoot those movies. Yeah, again, this is on Tubi if you want to watch it. It looks pretty good on there too,
And then
and you might
Bookwalter,
get a soap commercial.
the last thing he directed was Mega Scorpions in 2003. I'm surprised that he
Uh,
hasn't, in the world of Amazon Prime streaming and now Tubi streaming, the the world of shot on video horror has kind of returned. It's not analog shot on video, so we're not talking about it this way. But like you can just crank out a million movies that reference Amityville or a million, bad possession movies or whatever for no money now. And I'm surprised
he
that Bookwalter is not in that world.
Well, he retired, from what I understand, and I haven't really talked to him about this. The only time I talked to him is uh, when I asked him a question about the video, and that he contacted me when I used to work for DVD Active, so that I would asked if I would review Dead Next Door Ultimate Edition Blu-ray. And for a long time, his Twitter thing said former filmmaker, or like, so I think he sort of retired, and he became like like a software developer or something. And much more recently, like within the last 5 years, he's put back together his Makeflix company, and he started actually around the same time we did the first shot on video horror podcast. He re-released all of them on Blu-ray in a shot on video 6-pack, I think is what he called it. So he is sort of doing some stuff all of a sudden, and this is pretty new for him, I think. So he might get back into filmmaking. I could see it happening. But for now, he's just sort of reissuing movies he already had.
Well, the next movie is also by J.R. Bookwalter, Sandman from 1995. It's about a writer in a trailer who thinks that a monster is killing off the residents of his trailer park. It's a monster that kills people when they sleep. Maybe a little Nightmare on Elm Street, kind
of. Maybe a little.
Maybe a bit. My understanding is it has the kind of like hangout character vibes of Kingdom of the Vampires, and that the monster looks like a tall Jawa. So that's something I saw like 7 different reviews mention, is that the monster is just a big Jawa.
Okay.
It doesn't really have the reputation of an ozone. I don't think a lot.
I had never even heard of it until he said, we also shot Sandman. Like the message he sent me, I was like, what the hell is Sandman? I never heard of this one. So I looked. It claims it was streaming on something called Plex, but I could not get it to work. So
yeah, Plex is weird because Plex is like that. A Plex server is something that you use to access files when you're not at your home computer, and it's like, well, Plex, anything could be streaming on a Plex server. So I don't know what they mean by Plex.
Yeah, it was. I don't know.
So the last movie we're going to be talking about is technically a 2016 movie. It's by James Bryan, who we did not see his work previously, but we did talk about. Maybe it was
Don't Go in the Woods. We did talk about Don't Go in the Woods. We did the 1981 slasher movies.
Right, that's not what we talked about. A Renee Harmon movie directed by Frank Roach called Frozen Scream. Which is part shot on video and then part film clips from a shot on film movie by Renee Harmon. I don't really know what the cult around Renee Harmon is. I don't know what her career before shot on video was. But she is the lead of Jungle Trap, and it's a movie that was shot and unfinished in 1990. And then in 2016, Vinegar Syndrome, specifically the people from Bleeding Skull, I think. And I don't know if the people from Bleeding Skull also are part of Agva. I don't know that whole scene. But
I don't know.
But it was edited and score composed by, the list of producers includes Joseph A. Zimba. So it's like one of those things. And the score is done by the 2 people who do Bleeding Skull. So this is this is technically a 2016 release. This is sort of a love letter to shot on video, someone going back and completing something so that they can be part of shot on video history. It sucks. It's
bummer.
I wish we could end on a high note the way we ended on Shatterdead last time, but this movie's really boring. It's these archaeologists are going to go to this haunted hotel, which is just an excuse to have a jungle movie that takes place in someone's house. Which actually, when I read the Cinema of Transgression book way back when, one of the things that stuck with me was, I think it was Nick Zed was talking about an interview he read with John Waters, where John Waters was talking about, like, I want to make ambitious movies for no money, and like the cheapness is part of the fun. And he goes, I want to make a jungle safari movie that's just shot in someone's living room. And Nick Zed went on to do something like that, where he just, would have a branch with some leaves on it, and there would be like, oh, we're here in the Amazon. Jungle Trap is in fact a jungle Amazon safari movie that's just shot in someone's living room. It's kind of fun in that Renee Harmon is a terrible actor, and so there's just some goofiness to, like, just, oh yeah, there's a lot of ugly fashion. One funny thing is this was shot in 1990, but the people from Bleeding Skull, they have a other era of shot on video horror that they kind of fetishize. So the score is very like 1985 to 1987, like droning lo-fi synth, in a way that if this came out in 1990, it probably wouldn't have this kind of score. This is, so they go to this hotel, there's ghosts, they're trying to get this idol. You get the ghosts of the tribe who used to live in the rainforest coming back. None of the gore effects are any good. There's a couple shots here and there that are like stock footage from film. So this is a mixed media thing where you get some stuff that's shot on celluloid. But honestly, like, I've just found this so boring. The one thing I did like was that they did this, and again, this is edited after the fact. So when I say I'm talking about Bleeding Skull more than I'm talking about James Bryan. But they did this effect to show that the sort of tribesmen who are stalking the halls of this hotel, which is again just someone's suburban house, that they are ghosts by doing this like editing thing where it cuts to the empty hallway and then the ghost walking and then empty, and it like does a little strobe editing trick that's kind of fun. So there's a few little things like that are super low budget special effects that likely were not even intended at the time, but still add a little bit of texture and stuff. But I wish I could say this is like a hidden gem, and thank God people can finally see it. But in the world of shot on video horror, this is the nothing happens, no one is interesting, they didn't have any money to do any gore gags, and there's no nudity kind of a movie where you're just like, well, what's the point? Maybe they got to a certain point and realized that no one cared, and they were like, you know what, this isn't going to work, let's just junk it. And now the Blu-ray that I purchased that had Jungle Trap on it, it also has another movie by James Bryan rather, called Run Coyote Run. And everything I've heard about that movie, which is not a shot on video movie because it's mostly clips from old shot on celluloid movies. And this we could have talked about this if it was a horror, but it's not horror. That's why we weren't talking about it. It's like an action crime kind of a movie. Okay. And apparently it's absolutely fucking out of control and so weird. And it's just like a bunch of clips from all these old movies and stuff. But I have not watched it yet, but it's not horror. So it's not for this podcast, or not for this episode at the very least. And that is where we end our shot on video addendum.
We'll probably have another one at some point, because again, there was quite a couple on this list we weren't able to find, and there's still quite a few on the old list that we weren't able to find. So maybe sometime next year we'll try again. Yeah. Maybe these things are coming out real quick all of a sudden, so the odds are good that there'll be a source to actually watch them.
Yes, I think we are in this sort of heyday of, I don't know when, like it's all of a sudden every slasher movie got like luxury boutique Blu-rays, but eventually they did them all and they ran out. And and I feel like there's almost a similar, if smaller, land rush on these shot on video movies that if they can find the ones that don't have just like nonstop copyright infringement.
Yeah. So Patrick, remind the people what you do.
Oh yeah, I do technically have a podcast called Tracks of the Damned where I do commentary tracks for horror films. I haven't updated that in a long time, and I don't have immediate plans to update that again. I have a new podcast that's going to be coming out at some point in the next couple weeks, the first episode. It's called Uptown Song Club. I don't think me and you have even talked about this. This might come as a surprise to you. Where me and two guests we each bring a song and we all listen to the songs and we talk about them. And it's Uptown Song Club. It's just a sort of a relaxed music podcast where we do deep dives into individual songs, as opposed to like a lot of music discussion I see. It tends to be a lot broader in terms of like albums or like careers or genres or whatever. And I like the idea of spending 10 to 15 minutes on a single song and every aspect of it. So look for that. I don't have a website or anything set up for that yet, but if you go to Twitter and you look up Uptown Song Club at Uptown Song Club, that's going to be the Twitter account, and all the information you will need on that podcast will be there.
You know what's funny?
What?
Uptown Song Club has been liking my posts for weeks now, and I had no idea it was you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I went off Twitter, and then suddenly I was like, oh shit, I gotta have a Twitter again. And of course, the first thing I do is I follow Gabe Powers and I follow Genre Grinder. And what do I do when Gabe posts? I give it a like.
I'm like, oh, it's some sort of Prince fan. He must be a local Minnesota. Because I heard Uptown and I just thought the Prince song Uptown.
Yeah,
you should do that in your first episode.
we talk about Prince quite a bit because I have the same guests for the first 2 episodes, and one of them is a diehard Prince fan, and he finds a way to talk about Prince as often as he can.
As often as he can. Okay. Well, and then whenever Tracks of the Dam does come back, I'm still going to defend the beauty that is Nightmare on Elm Street 5, the Dream Child.
You and your dedication to the unloved fifth entries in mainstream slasher franchises is astounding, because you also are a big fan of Friday 13th Part 5.
Yeah, and I should say Nightmare 5 though is one like what you talk about. Friday 5 is trash, but great trash. Like, I really like Nightmare 5. I think it's fucking cool, and I wish there was an unrated version on disc. Anyway.
Oh yeah, from your lips to God's ears, that's for sure. But
yeah, fucking hell, Scream Factory or whoever currently has that shit. Okay, well, anyway, I can be reached as usual, Gabe M Powers on Twitter, Genre Grinder on Twitter, Genre Grinder website, Genre Grinder Facebook. I'll see you next month. Thanks for listening. Thanks, Patrick.
See ya.